be heard at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and move into new business, Broadway National. Tony, would you like to provide a
Yes.
quick overview?
Thank you, Sarah.
Mhm.
So the abstract's attached behind 2022 abstract. We did a project with Broadway National in 2017. It was to purchase the building at 100 Davids Drive. It's an existing 65,500 square foot building to be used as Broadway National Group's LLC's headquarters. So what they do is they're a national company, property management and technology company. So they some of their clients are like Hertz, Rent-A-Car, CVS, Walgreens, et cetera. Those type of large organizations that have multiple locations throughout the country, and they help their maintenance and the if the bathroom's leaking or if something needs to be done, the snow removal and all. So it's one point of contact. They contact Broadway National to do that, and then he's also developed some proprietary software that he uses, and so he views himself as a technology company. I would agree with that. I visited him this week and toured the facility, and they use a lot of there's a lot of young adults there. He has to compete with the other technology companies like Google and Apple for talent, and so this project, now whether you want to consider it an amendment to the existing project or a new project, he's wants to build out the first floor. Originally he thought that maybe use it for a staging area or warehouse. So right now it's down to cement and steel. So and he wants to build it out for office space. And originally, when he first approached the agency, he had about 100 jobs and promised to create 50. So but now he's exceeded that. He's at 236. So created 136 more than what he previously had. And he's proposing for this project 70 jobs. So, and about 25% of the jobs, 20 of the jobs are average salary of $80,000. So we provided sales tax exemption on this additional investment that he's making. And it's about $380,000, and then we're proposing to provide an additional abatement on the build out of the space, and it's estimated that that's going to be a savings of almost $400,000 over the 15 years. So it qualifies for 15 years because he's creating another 70 jobs. So 50 is usually the threshold to go from 10 to 15 years. So with that, we have Bill Paparella here, who's the CEO and founder of Broadway National. If anyone has any questions, if you want to give a brief overview or however you...
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everybody. From, I guess it's going on 34 years ago, where I founded the company out of my parents' garage. It started out as a neon sign company and has evolved into a company that does national facility maintenance and construction management services. And it continues to evolve, as Tony said, in terms of growth. Over the last 10 years, we've had 21% compounded growth in sales. This last year, we're up 39%. And we built the business on old-fashioned, family atmosphere, building a culture that people are very engaged in building the company and sharing its rewards. Customer service, taking care of customers. But I think the technology side has added the component of us being viewed in the marketplace as an innovator. And as Tony mentioned, developing our own software. We're actually now selling the software in some cases where we don't actually provide services for it, and they're just purchasing the app. And our experience working for these customers, put us in place over the last 3 years to build a new application that's having playing a very large role in accelerating the growth even beyond what we believe is the 21%. So while obviously with the look backs and everything else, as last time, we wanted to be conservative. You never know what the economy brings, what the marketplace brings. But, you know, we really looking to build this out for another 250 jobs, ideally, if we were to get approved, which really put us at 500 total jobs in this building. We do have offices, some small satellite offices, predominantly North Carolina in Raleigh with 15. But I live here. We've had a lot of success here, and Suffolk County in New York State has always acted very interested in our continued success, and if we can continue to do that, you know, we'd like to continue to have corporate headquarters and the majority of our growth here on the island. And again, where the business has changed is, you know, we're hiring, as Tony mentioned, software developers, engineers, and those kinds of jobs are really, you know, a big part of our growth going forward, alongside or in addition to the continued project managers, facility management professionals that we already hired.
Thank you for coming today. Questions on this?
Yeah, I just have one question. I guess it's more technical in nature regarding the difference from the existing project and the new application. 'Cause originally, the parking lot and the first floor were included in the original project. Is that correct? And I know because of COVID and all that, it didn't necessarily go forward at the time. But now we're including that work in the new application. Is there any impact to the original benefits because that work wasn't done under the original pilot? I mean, how does that?
So that's a good question. So we've reduced we're probably gonna amend the existing pilot or schedule for half. So, and then the other half is gonna be thrown into this amended part of the project, the first floor,
Okay, so you're adjusting the original.
Right.
Okay.
to reflect it.
And I think
Yes.
the best way to think about this is that this is additional financial assistance in connection with the amendment of an existing project where there's additional jobs and additional investment is being offered in Oakland.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Did you just say that you believe that you can create an additional 250 jobs if things move forward in the right direction?
Simple answer, yes. Okay, but I don't want to.
No, no.
Won't get to a trap.
No,
But
no trap
you
intended.
know, hopefully, where we put in some goodwill is the idea. The first time around, right? It's the first time. So we said, listen, 50 we were comfortable committing with, but it ended up it being, and I think it's 235, but I think we're actually, by the end of the year, probably gonna be at like 250. If we continue, and we see no reason why it would continue, other than the unknown, which does happen, why we wouldn't maintain this average of 21% growth, which is really doubling the size of the company every 4 years. Again, we had a year coming off last year that was 39%, and we think the added kicker of the technology is really a part of that. So we think so, yes, that's why, you know, make the investment. It's just the unknown and you know, what could happen with accounts or the economy or along those lines. But I don't see any reason why we wouldn't continue that growth.
Okay.
That growth rate, anyway.
No.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Seeing no questions, is there a motion from the board?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. Continue success.
Good luck.
Okay, old business, is there any other items under new business?
I know.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go to old business. Sunrise at Northport.
So Sunrise was approved by the board last month's meeting. So the project's an assisted living facility by Sunrise. They have name for this project, Sunrise of Northport Propco LLC. So it's on Pulaski Road. It's an old farm, vacant, overgrown. They can preserve a farmhouse on the property. They used to sell produce and all years ago on it, but it's vacant right now. And so they're gonna demolish a couple of the outer buildings that are on the property, it's 6 acres, and construct a 77,500 square foot assisted living facility on 6 acres. It's proposed for a 90-unit assisted living with 112 beds, and they're gonna have a Alzheimer's and memory care unit on this 2-story building. So there's 68 jobs anticipated to be created as a result of the project, with an average salary of about $55,000. And there's an estimate to create 152 construction jobs during the construction phase of the project. So the public hearing was held on Monday, and 2 representatives from the East Northport School District attended, the superintendent and then also the business superintendent. And they just had some questions on the mechanics of how the abatement would be applied and all, but they seemed satisfied with that. And they went on record saying that they're not against economic development. And they said that they may send in a letter, and they realized that they needed to do that by yesterday, which I've been checking our email and they haven't sent anything in. So they seem satisfied with the answers to the questions that they had. So this is ready for final approval consideration.
Questions?
This is previous farmland, Tom?
Yeah, it was years ago, it was, or at least I don't remember, is it farmland, but it was a farm stand.
Stand on there, okay, because I was gonna ask if they had to do the soil remediation while they built.
And I think they've already passed that
Okay.
phase, and
Yeah,
David Curry,
we have
Did you have
council.
to?
Yeah, we have a clean environmental,
Okay.
yeah.
But did you have to do work on it?
I'm not representing them on the acquisition
Okay.
of the property,
Don't worry about it.
but I do not believe any work has been done on the property at all.
Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, so much a question, but more just kind of explaining where my mindset is on this particular application. And, I questioned Kevin Grempsey a little bit on his analysis of the project at our last meeting. And basically the data and the metrics he provided, showed, substantial return on investment and profit margins for the project that I felt showed they could probably do this without the assistance. And I think the response was, it's an inflationary period and it's a risky business, and investors want to know that they have that extra assistance to move forward. But I just feel that our responsibility as a board is to look at the need and the but-for clause of these projects, and if the information provided to me shows that likely if they decided to move forward without the assistance, that would probably be built. It's a regional project. They had to make an assessment for this particular area for placement. It's not necessarily a facility you would build somewhere else and they're going to move far away to go to it. It was strictly because there's a population that's aging here that would have a need. They know they feel they can fill up these beds if it's built. And I think even I forget the name of who presented on behalf of the company at the
Bill
time.
Kroskin.
Yeah, Raskin, it even said that maybe even in the past, when they had gotten help, maybe it wasn't necessarily as necessary then, but things have gotten tougher now and they really need it. But we have a tough perception with IDAs as it is, on Long Island. Generally, 100% of the projects coming through the IDAs are getting approved, and I think sometimes the public looks at us as a rubber stamp. It's there's not a lot of really pushback or projects getting voted down, and it's just tough for me when I see data saying one thing. I'm not saying that they're not being truthful. Maybe they won't want to move forward because of the situation. But I think even with inflation, the information, the budget information that was given to us was factored into there, and it still showed that it could be profitable and built, without the assistance. So, I think for me, it's just we have to start looking at some of these projects that maybe not need our help, and see what happens if we don't approve them, because I think it's as our responsibility to the taxpayer. These are projects, if they went forward without the assistance, that's more tax revenue to the area. These school districts, we know, certainly need it. There's a lot of small businesses that struggle and take risks in the area that aren't eligible for assistance. And when you have these large companies that have been very successful, the data shows that they can be successful here, and the economic information and budget information shows that they could be profitable without our help. I'm just not comfortable providing assistance in that situation. So I think I will be voting no on this application.
Any other comments by the board? Can we have the applicant respond? Is that?
Well, I guess maybe if I could say a few things. I remember Kevin, last meeting, Kevin Grimps, who presented the NDC report. We have him on the phone, I
Kevin's
guess,
on
if he
the
wants
line
to.
as well, yeah.
Do you want to hear his reaction to anything, or
Sure.
comments, or?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Kevin?
Yes. Good
Hey.
afternoon. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. So I know there's some AV challenges here, so I wasn't able to hear everything. What I did hear is the lack of clear but for argument on this, and the majority of projects for which I have presented to you as a board over the last few years absolutely has a more of a clear but-for argument. And majority of those developments are residential developments. And in residential developments, full property taxes can be 30 to 40% of the operating expenses. And when they're 30 to 40% of the operating expenses, it makes it really challenging. So normally I present to you a scenario of the operating pro forma without a pilot, and oftentimes the cash flow is negative or it's just barely positive. And then I show you the scenario of how the operations look at with the pilot, where you have substantial savings in the real estate taxes, and that creates the financial viability. And there is a absolutely strong but-for argument that without the financial assistance offered to those applicants, those developments would not be able to proceed. Now, some of the commercial developments are a little bit different. That was the case, and we had a good discussion, a spirited discussion on some of those warehouse distribution centers. And Josh, you were absolutely right on those warehouse distribution centers. There was not as clear of a but-for test, because when you look at the real estate taxes overall to the operating expenses, whether it be a distribution warehouse or whether it be, in this case, an assisted living facility, the real estate taxes are a smaller percentage of the operating expenses. And that's why I made a very clear distinction between Sunrise as an assisted living facility really being a commercial operation. The real estate taxes as a percentage of operating expenses is just about 2% of overall operating expenses. I told you, and that is largely due to the fact that most of the operating expenses are personnel. So you have, in the first year, operating expenses, well, by the second year, the operating expenses are almost $10 million. And given the fact that the operating expenses are only that are almost $10 million, most of them are attributable to fairly high wage jobs that are part of this. 83 full-time family supported jobs. And that's where most of the operating expenses are. So the distinction between not having a pilot and having a pilot is not as strong as when we're dealing with the residential developments, whereby the real estate taxes could be as high as 30 or 40% of operating expenses. But this is a commercial enterprise, and that's why the IDA has made available a 45B, which is standard commercial pilot structure. It's only 10 years, and the savings of that real estate taxes is only 25% during that 10-year period of time. So is it an absolute but-for test? Without the pilot, the development is financially feasible? No. Is it a incentive whereby Suffolk IDA is promoting a business-friendly environment to offset the very, very high cost of land and the very high cost of construction and the increases in interest costs, which legitimately presents some challenges and risks for development of this size of $50 million. So the development budget, and again, this was pointed out, these costs for this facility is more than 30% higher than the cost just a few years ago when they placed it into when they placed their other facility in Suffolk into service. And I guess I looked at the fact that the overall financial package between the pilot and the exemptions on the sales tax and mortgage recording taxes, together they being $3 million. That is 5% of the overall investment. So we have a 20, almost a 20-to-1 ratio in terms of private investment compared to the overall financial incentive package that is available to incentivize and to mitigate the risk of that $54 million investment. So, Josh, I can't make the absolute clear but-for case that often is presented to you and the board on those other residential developments. But given the fact that this is standard for commercial development in terms of a 10-year pilot phase-in, and it accords really only a 25% discount on taxes during a 10-year period of time, I think that's a solid investment package to make sure that the investment takes place. And I don't remember his name, but the development director for Sunrise acknowledged the fact that they do this all over the country. They have the opportunity to make decisions as to where they make the investments. And perhaps if we can't present the absolute but-for case, would they do this? I don't know, but there's certainly a lot higher likelihood they wouldn't do it again if they didn't feel as though they had some level of incentive and partnership with Suffolk County and the Suffolk County IDA. So I think it's more of a policy issue in terms of having these incentives available as part of a pro-business and pro-development county than it is more of a financial argument of, but for this, the investment wouldn't happen. So I think I'll just stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, so there's 68 jobs being created that doesn't exist. And so a lot of them are quite well-paying jobs, some of the hourly wages, so that's what brings down the average salary. But, these are generally, well-paying jobs in these assisted living facilities. And then also, we've mentioned it before, and Kevin alluded to it, 45B, real property tax exemption. So the county is still part of that and providing that assistance. So, you could actually look at what we're providing. We didn't do the net on it, but, so county taxes are usually 10% of the overall tax bill. So, even if they didn't do an IDA, they'd be able to go to the property tax assessor and get a 45B exemption on this county property taxes. I mean, a lot of the schools and the towns have pulled back and don't provide that anymore, but so the 45B, so the IDA, all the IDAs were founded on the 45B type of abatement over 10 years. So it really didn't address financial need. It was like, if you made the investment, this is what you would get. You would get this abatement. So that's historically how it is evolved with the IDA. So, I mean, one part of it now is the financial need, and it's, so I guess every board member's purview to consider how much weight they want to put on that. But there's still the other aspects of consideration for a project. So,
Is it, are we allowed to hear from the applicant at this time?
Sure. My name is David Curry, Farrell Fritz. I represent the applicant. Josh, thank you for your concerns as a resident of the county. I appreciate that you're asking these questions. As far as the but-for test, which is really what the crux of the question is, Philip Kroskin, who was here last time with me, did clearly say on the record that it was the but-for test is met here, in that Sunrise is not going to make investments in the future in New York State without IDA assistance. It's part of their pro forma. It's a part of the pro forma that they send to investors. You just heard Kevin say that the incentives package comes to about 5%, $3 million on 60, or about 60. But that small 5% difference is the difference between a reasonable rate of return for the investors that have to sign on to this project and an unreasonable rate of return. Without the incentives, the numbers are such that the big investors that own Sunrise are going to walk away from this project. And as a result, we'll default on we'll terminate the contract, default on and lose the deposit and all of the legal and other fees that they've paid to date. They'll move on to the next project. The notion that the schools and other taxing jurisdictions will lose money here, this is almost entirely vacant property at the moment. I'm going to make up numbers because I don't have them in front of me. With the project being built, it's something of a 10 to 15-fold increase in taxes based on the assessment that we don't have now, but we have a pretty good precedent based on the fact that we built this exact building in the town of Huntington 4 years ago. That abatement, even with the abatement, will be a significant increase in the taxes, and the fact that the school district is not here to oppose it, I think, says a lot about that. With this being built and a pilot in place, the taxing jurisdictions are going to see a significant increase in the amount of taxing revenue that they'll get than they're getting today as vacant land. We also cannot factor in, and Kevin was not able to factor in, what we discussed last time, which is the LIPA settlement of the power plant that's in the school district. There's no way of knowing what the future holds, but the school district especially is going to see multi-million-dollar decreases in the amount of money they're going to get every year from the power plant. The only way they can compensate for that loss is to raise the taxes within the jurisdiction. You cannot put that, when you say that the benefit to the town, and you weigh that in Kevin's report, you can't put that in there because there's no way of knowing how the town's going to react as these amounts of money are put in place. So we weren't able to show that the tax burden on the property will increase over time, but we know, my firm knows from being personally involved in the litigation and a settlement that's public, the amount of money that the taxing jurisdiction is going to receive per year is going to go down to the tune of 7 figures a year, which is going to be a very tough thing for the school district to absorb without the inevitable response, which is going to be to raise the tax rate. The operating expenses, like Tony was talking about, they're very high and they're going to be incurred right away. The highest paying jobs that Sunrise will present must be in place. The executive director, the head chef, the head nurse, all of the executive positions, once you put one person in and move them in, they have to be in place. It's the lower paying jobs that will increase over time as the as the occupancy rate increases. The COVID has had an unbelievable impact on the entire industry, not just Sunrise. The industry island-wide was enjoying a 90% occupancy rate, and the 10% is that's just the nature of the business. People move out, go to unfortunately pass away, or go on to more care. There was a mass exodus with COVID of families taking their loved ones out of assisted living because of the fear that they would get COVID in these facilities. And there's a very slow return of those people back into these facilities that will continue, in the demand, because of the numbers that Sunrise is relying on in order to build this, that demand will come back, but it's very slow, and occupancy rates right now are in the 50s and 60s, which the industry has not seen. It's improving from the worst of COVID, but there's a long way to go, and therefore revenue is down. The need for the pilot is ever higher, along with construction costs that have gone through the roof. Any builder will attest that lumber, steel, concrete, the numbers are staggering. 40, 50, 60% increases over the past couple of years. And like I said, the pro forma that Sunrise gives to its investors and to construction lenders includes, the pilot that we anticipate getting. And it makes all the difference between a lender saying, okay, we'll lend on this with, the possibility of a permanent financing in the future, or we won't. And these investors, the investors that Philip told you about that make up Sunrise are a pension fund and a REIT. The rate of return without IDA benefits is such that they will turn this project down and it won't get built. So Sunrise does, and Philip did say last time on the record that they have an internal policy at Sunrise now that they need IDA assistance to build in New York because of the construction across the board, but especially because of, we all know it, we live here, the taxes are a tremendous burden on the island. They're just looking for assistance.
What is a reasonable return on the investment that an investor expects on a project?
I don't have those figures in front of me. That's something that's done between Sunrise and its investors. I don't have that information, unfortunately.
Because I believe, in Kevin's reports, it typically shows, what a lender would expect and what the numbers are. Is Kevin still on the phone?
Yep.
Kevin, as far as the 30% increase in construction costs from prior projects, and the inflationary pressure on these types of projects, those numbers were factored into the report you provided, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the most recent development budget, but I use the cost estimates that were included in the IDA application. But the construction costs are fairly fluid these days, and unfortunately, fluid going up, not down, on a consistent basis. In terms of your question, Josh, in terms of IRR, again, given the fact that this is considered more of an operating business than a residential development, it has a higher risk profile. You think of everything involved in Medicaid reimbursement, the suits relative to treatment of elderly and patients. There's just a lot more that you're exposed to in terms of risk in operating one of these buildings. And the higher the level of risk, the higher returns that investors want. So I have presented to you residential developments where the without factoring in refinancing, we're showing internal rate of return for standard residential developments at typically between 10 and 12%. But yet, given the fact that this has a higher level of risk, the investors want to see a pro forma that be able to show a higher level of internal rate of return. So risk is a function of, return is a function of perception of risk. Given the fact that there is a higher percentage of risk with this operating business as opposed to a standard residential development, investors rightfully want a higher return than what they would expect in a standard residential development. So the returns that I showed to you on the report, yes, it is a little bit higher than what you've seen in residential developments, but in my estimation, it is certainly not undue enrichment because the investors will demand higher returns for an operating business such as this with a higher level of risk.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, but I will make a motion.
Okay, you'll make a motion to
Reduce.
reduce? Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes?
No.
Abstentions?
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
appreciate it.
Okay, next item up is Canon USA.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So Canon project is coming towards the end of its agreements with the agency. And so the property never really had an assessment on it, a true assessment. It's still, as if you look on the tax rolls, it's still, the assessment is only at the land, with the land value. At the time, so we consulted when we, it's a fixed pilot payment schedule of like 13 years. And so at the time, back 10 or 13 years ago, we consulted with the town assessor at the time, and we came up with some estimates on what the property taxes would be over time. So it turns out the assessor put an assessment on it. The company had reached out to us to seek the town assessor's input on what the assessment would be on the property at full taxes. And it turns out that it's about $600,000. The upcoming year, it's about $500,000 to $600,000 less than what the pilot payment would be. So next year's pilot payment is the last pilot payment for this agreement at $2.7 million. And so if you use the assessment that the assessor came up with times today's tax rate, because we don't know what next year's tax rates are yet, we'll know that next month. It's about 2.1 million. So it's about $500,000 or $600,000 difference. So what they want to do is what they're requesting, and we spoke to them. They have the right to terminate the transaction, and then they'll get what they want as far as paying the actual tax amount as opposed to the higher amount of the pilot amount. But we spoke to the company, and they felt that it would be better, and I think it's better for the taxing jurisdictions also that they pay the full tax amount in the form of a pilot payment, because then the taxing jurisdictions can get their payments next year rather than wait an extra year, because it's too late to send out a tax bill for the upcoming tax year. So in a year from now, they'll get a double. The company would get the double bill. They would get the upcoming year's tax bill plus the 23-24 tax bill, and so it would delay the taxing jurisdictions from getting their funds. So they agreed, and then also we had a meeting with the assessor, with the company and their counsel, and there's maybe some further refinement of that assessed value number. So there was some things that maybe weren't taken into consideration, so they're still looking at it. But so today would be just consideration of an initial approval, and then we have to hold a public hearing and then come back in December for the final approval, because I guess there's a change in the, in the agreement, so.
Because we would be reducing the pilot payment by more than $100,000, that could be considered new benefits, so it'd be saved from all the public hearing, and then come back to the board, final authorizing resolution consideration at the December.
So, and then we have representatives from Canon here, Amy Newman, who was with the company from way back when it was first, when it was farmland, and we know it was a pumpkin farm.
It was a pumpkin farm.
So, and then Dan Deegan, the council, and
Dana Judge.
Dana
Dana Judge.
from Canon, so.
So the only thing I'd like to point out to the board, Dan Deegan with Shelley Deegan Tirana in Uniondale, New York, is that this has been a very big success for the county, for the state, and for the company. This project has, they currently have over 1,000 jobs at the site. They're very high-paying jobs. It's just been an excellent exercise in the county using its economic development incentives to attract a company to Suffolk County and to have them build a very large facility, which is right now it's owned by a Japanese parent company. Ultimately, this is the North American or the American headquarters for Canon. They've gone through challenges which have been communicated to the IDA board in terms of the camera business. Everybody knows from their iPhones what's happened to the camera business. So they have pivoted and gone into other businesses and expanded other business lines, and they're still very successful. But they certainly have weathered a lot of changes in the technology and the economy. And they're still here in Suffolk County. They want to stay here in Suffolk County, and we'd appreciate your support. And we just want to be right-sized at this point as to what the taxes should be on the facility. And to Tony's point, this is a smoother mechanism for everybody if we just adjust the pilot rather than terminate, go back on the tax rolls, and have to go through a process. We did have a very good meeting yesterday with the assessor. We presented some facts to the assessor to consider, and they seem very open to considering those facts, and they're going to be refining their assessment. Hopefully we'll get a final estimate before this comes back to you guys in December, if you're so inclined to move forward with this.
Yeah, and this project came to be through very active involvement of the county and the IDA. They were true partners in bringing Canon to that site.
And Tony, this would also avoid the taxing jurisdiction from having to reimburse monies too, is that correct? If they went back on the tax rolls, there'd be some sort of a reimbursement, that the taxing jurisdiction would have to send money back to Canon if we didn't do this.
If they did a tax return.
Right, yeah.
But timing wise, as Tony said, if we terminate it now, they couldn't get on the tax rolls in time for the taxing jurisdiction to send out a tax bill. So the school district and the town and the county would get no money for the 22-23, then they get a double payment next year, but that really hurts the school district, particularly by this protects the taxing jurisdiction, so they get the revenues.
So there's no certiorari involved here, this
No,
is really
because
just a,
this actually circumvents the certiorari for the town and the company.
and this would just be on a go-forward basis.
Going forward basis, there'll be an agreed upon assessment with the assessor, so it's kind of a win for the taxing jurisdictions, the assessor and the company.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
Go ahead.
Sounds good.
Got it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? Seeing none, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
575, Broad Hollow Energy.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So this was a project that the agency closed on in last year, 2021, July. So just to refresh everybody, it's a electric power generating 7.6 megawatt fuel cell on the property, 575 Broad Hollow Road. So there's an office building on the property already, so this was an unused portion of the parking lot. And so it almost looks like a transmission system, just like servers, just like stacked on each other. It's not online yet, but it's pretty close to it. So the parent company, Generate Capital, is asking for consent for the change of ownership entity internally, so it's an intra-company. They thought that they were gonna have, so 575 Broad Hollow Energy LLC is one of their companies, the owning entity for this project. So, but the upstream, the next level up in the corporate world of the company, they want to change that entity to another entity within their organization. So this is more of an administrative change, but it requires the documents. In hindsight, we probably should have had the document saying if any internal change like this was needed, that all they would have to do was notify the agency, but we didn't write it that way.
So the way the documents are drafted, it designated the name of the entity that these tax credits will go into. And it was supposed to generate C&I Warehouse 2 LLC, and it got changed to generate CDG Fuel Cell 1 LLC. Tax it just, as very often happens once they structure these tax equity agreements, the people said, I know you created a special purpose entity, but we want a brand new one, just in case that one you created last year has any liabilities running with it. So it's really just same structure, just basically changing the name of the LLC that the tax equity investors are coming in, and that's how this project is financed with tax equity investors. So we actually got too specific at the time. We thought we were gonna be correct, and we maybe learned our lesson going forward, not to be quite so
Well,
specific.
the company probably, they
Well,
don't
they
think,
thought-
they don't think of the alternative, they just like, oh, it's going to this one, and it's not the case. So they needed to do these tax credits prior to this meeting, so in consultation with Transaction Counsel Bill, we felt comfortable enough, I signed the consent, and so
So this is
today for the board is to
ratify
consent and to
confirm
ratify
Tony.
my signature of it.
But this tax equity
Pull them off the
investment was critical to getting it built. So Tony put his name on the line.
Questions from the board? Seeing none, is there a motion to ratify and consent? Consent and ratify.
Oh, okay. I'll make a motion.
Thanks. Is there a second? I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? Seeing none,
On
passes.
behalf of Tony, thank you.
There is precedent for this, but
There is, but still.
it's been a while since we had to do something like
We didn't
this
want to
in
see you in
advance.
silver bracelets.
Well, thank you.
No.
Any other old business? Seeing none, we'll move to other business. Open meetings law. So this was, we discussed this in committee. The committee is recommending moving this to the full board for consideration in amendments to the open meetings law.
Motion to approve?
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing minutes.
So the minutes from the last meeting was circulated, so just need to have them accepted.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any other business before us?
Nope, so the next board meeting is December 15th. It's the annual luncheon that we'll have. And so the meeting will probably start early, around 10:30. We'll see what we have on the agenda, but figure at this point at 10:30 a.m. meeting, and then we'll have the luncheon at noon at a local restaurant.
We are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.